You should have two handouts in front of you that the sub gave you. One is a pink paper and the other is a gray one. The gray one you're going to be cutting into pieces and labeling and gluing onto the pink paper. But before you do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of review notes to help you with the other side. So you should be on this side of the paper. These white boxes, these blank boxes, is where you're going to take some notes today as we review the difference between action and linking verbs. So we haven't done action verbs for a couple of weeks, so this will be a good recap. Obviously, if we learned it and have tested on it already, it's something I expect you still to remember. So action verbs have two special complements that go with them. We can look for a direct object and indirect objects. And when we find them, we should see them in this order with this sentence pattern. We find a subject, followed by an action verb, followed by a direct object. Sometimes we have some word or words left in between our action verb and direct object, and so we can look for an indirect object. If we find a subject and an action verb, we would then want to ask the question, whom or what, to find our direct object. Mrs. Culleton bought whom or what did she buy? Mrs. Culleton bought candy. If we still see some words in between those in our sentence, then I can go another step and say Mrs. Culleton bought candy. To whom or for whom did she buy the candy? Mrs. Culleton bought candy for her students. And it's very important that that indirect object be in the middle of the sentence, because sometimes that same meaning can come through in a prepositional phrase, and it's not going to be in this order. So these sentence patterns and these orders really matter. I want you to fill in 10 action verbs down here, any 10 action verbs, and I want you to keep them in present tense. And I'd like for you to come up with some good extreme and absolute language types of verbs. So not verbs like said or walked or went. Give me some good vivid verbs. So I have sprint, saunter, drive, and I want you to come up with 7 more. You can pause the screencast if you want to do that, and then pick it up after you've filled those in. And then we're going to go on to the complements that go with linking verbs. Again, a complement is a word that comes after the verb and it completes the meaning or the thought of that verb. So we can have predicate adjectives and we could have predicate nouns. If we see a predicate adjective, it looks like this. Subject with a linking verb, followed by an adjective that goes back and describes that subject. If it's a predicate noun, we'll have a subject with a linking verb and a predicate noun that goes back and links to the subject in that way. In this case, it would be renaming the subject instead of describing it. And we had 2 criteria that would help us determine whether or not a verb was action or linking. The first criteria is that it has to be on that list of 18 that we memorized last week. If we see that verb, we then want to look to see, is there a word after that linking verb that links back to the subject? If it's an adjective, it describes the subject. If it's a noun, it renames it. And now I want you to write down your 18 linking verbs. And here they are. Check your spelling. So what you're going to do on the other side of this is identify some sentence patterns in the sentences that I've given you. And I'm going to give you some advice so that if you don't finish it during class, you don't lose all the pieces, because this is going to be a graded assignment. So the first piece of advice is to label the sentences first, following the procedures that we went through in class. Before you cut anything, get out your highlighter and your pencil and go one sentence at a time and label them. Don't cut all of the sentences out until you're ready to glue them. Or if you want to work, then do one at a time. But don't cut all of your pieces out, because if the bell rings and you're frantically trying to clean up, you're going to lose some of the pieces. So either go one at a time or just wait until the end when you have all of them labeled. And the last bit of advice is to make sure that you don't have a big mess. You're going to use little dots of glue right in the middle. It's going to look just like this. That's it. No lines, no squiggles, no outside edges, just one teeny tiny dot right in the middle. Okay? So I'm going to get you started. If you flip to the other side of your page, you have a chart that looks like this. Each of our 4 sentence patterns are at the top, and you're going to cut the sentences out and glue them according to the sentence pattern, and you'll see that there are 4 of each type. Use the markings that we've done in class to help you identify the sentence pattern for each sentence. Highlight prepositional phrases, bracket your infinitives, label the subject and the action verb, and then use the questions to help you find your complements. Then you're going to cut out the squares and glue them in the correct column of the chart. If for some reason you finish this early, a challenge for you is, can you put the sentences in order to create a story? If you want to try this, you might want to number them in the order that you think that they go and use the transitions to help you. If you figure it out, go ahead and send me an email and type out what that story is, and there may be a little treat for you. All right, so now on your gray paper, you have a bunch of sentences that look like this. It looks very overwhelming at first, so I want you to just think about working one sentence at a time. Let's start with this one. They were relaxed and ready for the next day. Go find that sentence on in your gray paper, and we're going to go through the process of highlighting the prepositional phrase for the next day, looking for a subject. Who is the sentence about? It's about they. Now I want to find the verb, they were, and I've determined that it's a linking verb because it's on my list of 18. And there's a word after it that describes or links back to that subject they. They were relaxed. And I see a conjunction here, so there are 2 things that they were. They were relaxed and ready. I was able to figure out that they were predicate adjectives because I know that if I have a noun, I can put the in front of it. And if I said the relaxed, that doesn't make sense as a noun, so it's got to be a predicate adjective. Now, if you want to go sentence by sentence, you can cut this one sentence out, put a little teeny tiny dot of glue in the middle, and we're going to glue it under the box for predicate adjective. Okay? All right, let's go find your next sentence. Find a sentence that says, it was a long day with a sweet ending. You're going to highlight your prepositional phrase with a sweet ending. Look for your subject, it. Find your verb, was, and again, I have to stop and think, is it action or linking? I've determined that it is a linking verb because it's on my list of 18, and it has a word after it that goes back and either describes or renames it. It was a day. What kind of day? A long day. Now I want to check and see, is that a predicate noun or adjective? Can I put the in front of day, the day? Yep, then it must be a predicate noun. So if you are working right now on cutting, you're going to cut this one single sentence out. You're going to put one little dot of glue in the middle, and you're going to glue it under the column for predicate noun. All right, go find this sentence. To Mrs. Culleton's annoyance, the cashier gave her the wrong change. I'm going to highlight my prepositional phrase, to Mrs. Culleton's annoyance. I can also see that it's being used as a transition because it's at the beginning of a sentence. The subject is cashier. What did the cashier do? The cashier gave. That's an action verb. Once I find an action verb, I have to think about the complement that comes after it. I'm going to find a direct object first. And again, if you need to refer back to the notes on the other side of this page, that's what they're there for. The cashier gave whom or what did the cashier give? The cashier gave change. And I do see some words in the middle here, so I want to see, can I find an indirect object? The cashier gave change to whom or for whom? The cashier gave change to her. So I find the sentence pattern, subject plus action verb plus io plus do. So I'm going to cut that one little sentence out, put one little dot of glue in there, and glue it in this column. After school, Mrs. Culleton and Miss Wagner got Starbucks to celebrate. Go find this sentence. We're going to start by highlighting our prepositional phrase. I see an infinitive over here, to plus a verb, to celebrate. So I'm left with Mrs. Culleton and Miss Wagner got Starbucks. Who's the sentence about? Well, I've got two subjects. It's about Mrs. Culleton and, because I have a conjunction here, Miss Wagner. What did they do? They got. I know it's not a linking verb because it's not on my list of 18, so it's got to be an action verb. If there's an action verb, I ask myself, whom or what? Mrs. Culleton and Miss Wagner got whom or what did they get? They got Starbucks. And there are no other words left between my action verb and my direct object, so that's it. So I'm going to go cut that one little sentence out. I'm going to put one little dot of glue here and stick it right in here. Now again, you'll see that there is no glue seeping out from mine because I didn't use too much glue. There is a chance that you won't finish this today in class, and if that happens and you try to put this in your folder, if you're using too much glue, then you're going to have a big mess. Okay? So take your time, label the sentences, go one at a time. After you're done watching the screencast, I do want you to put your Chromebooks away and try to get this done before the end of the period. Should you finish this, you can either work on your article of the week or do some silent reading and then go ahead and turn this paper in if you're done. Good luck, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me.